AEW, Blood and Guts, on Wednesday night was number one for the night on all of cable television for the first time in the show's history in the coveted 18-49 demo. And by a pretty wide margin. Raw, as bad as it is, it pretty much does that almost every week. But it's the first time that AEW has been able to do it in its history. It was not their biggest demo ever. It was the second biggest demo ever, but it was the first time they landed in the number one spot. And TNT has to be elated with that. But I thought the overall audience would be higher. They were back over 1 million viewers. They were up from 889,000 the week before. But only at 1.09 million. I thought going in, anything under 1.3 for a heavily promoted show like this would be disappointing. But there were a few people in the live chat on Wednesday night during the post-show stream when I asked for people's predictions saying, 1.7 million. They're going to do 1.9 million. I hope they don't drug test at your place of employment. You might want to call out sick that day. There was never any chance of that happening. None. I would have grown whiskers and shit in the litter box if that were the case. Not going to happen. But it is nice to be optimistic. Now, let's talk just a little bit here about this Blood and Guts match, because there was a lot of debate, and there was a lot of, not even controversy, it was a very polarizing match, very polarizing finish or post-match bump, right, with the MJF Chris Jericho thing. First of all, loved the live crowd on Wednesday night. When that match got going, man, that crowd, they only had about 1,600 people in the building. I thought it was a little bit more than that. But, man, you would think that place was packed. You would think that they were at full capacity. These people were amped up, and no, it wasn't fake crowd noise. I heard from a whole bunch of people, actually, who were in Jacksonville for the show. These people were amped up, and it made a world of difference. It was a bloody affair. It was actually closer to the original War Games matches, not just based on the rules that they use and the top on the cage, but, even more so than the ones in NXT. Just, the brutality of it and the blood. And, was there too much blood? Probably. I don't know that every fucking person had to bleed, but, or it felt like almost every person bled. The ad breaks did hurt, but look, they're a necessary evil. When you put a match like this on television and not on pay-per-view, it's the same problem that people had with the Iron Man match with Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar on SmackDown back in 2003. And that was a longer match. So you're kind of getting into it, and all of a sudden, we got to go to commercial. And it does kind of take you out of it. But it was the right outcome. The heels had to go over here. They're the newer faction. They're the newer group. They had to be established in a dominant way. They needed this win more than the Inner Circle did. And the Pinnacle came out with the win. I thought that the finish going in, my prediction had been that Chris Jericho would actually surrender because the Pinnacle was about to do something really evil to Sammy Guevara. And in fact, it was just the opposite, where you could hear, they were outside the cage. They made their way up to the top, which, weird, given the fact that you had a top on the cage. Why do they need to leave the cage? But we have MJF and Chris Jericho on top, on the roof of the cage. And MJF is threatening to throw Jericho off to his death. And down below, you can hear Sammy Guevara surrender. Because MJF is saying, if you don't surrender, I'm going to throw him off. And so Sammy Guevara is the one who actually gave up for his team. And that gave the Pinnacle the win. And of course, MJF, being the prick that he is, he pushed him off anyway. And Jericho took about a 10-foot bump down onto some mattresses down below that were disguised to look like a metal grate, but very clearly they were not. Now, I want to get into this here. Now, I said this during my review. This is nothing new. I tweeted about it the other day too. But I made this clear the night of the show to anybody who watched and anybody who listened on the download. I made it very clear. I was very specific in what my criticism was of this finish. Because I have seen, as I said on Twitter, I saw so many absolutely horrendous takes the morning after from a lot of people. And it's one thing to see them from random eggs with no avatar on Twitter. But I saw people with blue checks next to their name saying some of the dumbest shit that I have seen in a very long time. Criticizing the criticisms that people had of the finish to that show and the big bump at the very end, saying, oh my god, I can't believe, did all these people expect Chris Jericho to fall on actual concrete? Did they really think he was gonna die? No, you fucking moron. No, actually, that's not what people were hoping. That's not what people were expecting. And the thing about it is that these people know better. These are people in some cases, and I'm not going to name names, but these are people in some cases who should know better. And they just spewed some of the dumbest takes that I have seen. Absolutely no one of note was arguing this. This was the ultimate straw man argument that I saw constantly up and down my timeline the morning after this Blood and Guts show. I actually explained in great detail how I would have shot that final scene. My criticism had everything to do with the way it was shot and the production of it. Yes, we have seen countless times in AEW, we have seen countless times in WWE, and probably other promotions as well, but WWE has done it a whole bunch over the years, where somebody will fall, or somebody will be pushed onto a giant box or a giant crash pad. Right? We've seen this time and time again, and sometimes the way it's shot, it looks terrible. But then other times, if you think about some of those early Shane McMahon bumps, for example, Shane McMahon took one of the scariest bumps I've ever seen. I mean, I'm afraid of heights anyway. But it was SummerSlam, I want to say back in 2000. Right, it was him and Steve Blackman. I think that was the year they had their match, and they were scaling the truss or whatever by the entranceway. And Shane had to be, I mean, legitimately every bit of 40 feet, right, 40 or 50 feet in the air. And Blackman is on one side. He's got a kendo stick in his hand. Shane has his back turned to where he was going to fall. And Blackman whacks him with a kendo stick, and Shane just takes this dive. He just falls backwards and falls off, and is kind of like floating through the air. I cannot ever imagine doing that. If I did that with a harness, I would still shit myself. Okay, this guy's got brass balls taking bumps like that. But I remember the way that was shot. And I remember Shane falling backwards, and they kind of panned out, and they had this wide shot. And all you saw was Shane off in the distance falling backwards, and you heard a loud crash. I don't remember them zooming in. Maybe on the replay they did, but I remember them zooming in on it as he was falling. The way it was shot, it actually looked pretty cool. Right? Other times, not so much. So, no, this is nothing new. To all the people doing the whataboutism, oh, what about WWE? They do it all the time. These people are fucking morons too. Yes, we've seen this countless times before, and guess what? In those situations, I didn't want to see those people fall to the concrete either. You know why? Because I'm not a deranged psychopath. It's all in the way that it's shot. My suggestion would have been, if that was going to be the final kind of parting shot of the show, yeah, I keep saying the finish. I mean, technically the finish came before that. This was not technically the finish of the match, but when people say the finish, I think you know kind of what they're talking about. But what they did here was, after MJF sent Jericho off the cage, plummeting down to his death, he was up on top of that cage what felt like forever. They were stalling for time. They still had time left to kill on the broadcast. So he was just kind of standing around on top doing a whole lot of nothing. But then they zoomed in on MJF, and he looked down at Jericho, and he said, thank you. Because if you remember, before the Blood and Guts match, he said that he was going to take Jericho's spot, and then he was going to thank him for it. And that's what he did. He said, thank you. Well, what I would have done is I would have had him up on top with Jericho, and you could do the exact same finish. He's threatening to throw him off. Sammy says, no, we surrender, right? They sacrifice the win to save their leader. And MJF says, okay, he got what he wanted, right? He got a big smile on his face. He's helping Jericho, who's all groggy. He's helping Jericho up to his feet. He's got his hand on his shoulder. And the camera zooms in real close, and he says to Jericho, Chris, thank you. And then with that comes the push. And then he shoves Jericho off. And then, instead of shooting it as Jericho is falling and getting a zoomed in shot of him landing on the friggin' mattress, or the crash pad, You could do the same thing they did with Shane and Blackman all those years ago. You can pan out to where when Jericho falls, he falls out of camera view. You hear the crash, but you don't actually see it. And then they have a few seconds to kind of look it over on the replay and said, all right, this doesn't look too bad. We'll replay it at a bunch of different angles. But if it does kind of look bad, you don't have to replay it at that angle. You can make that judgment call after the fact, but you have this really dramatic shot as you kind of pan out slowly of Jericho falling, but you don't actually see the crash. You hear it, or you see the expression on MJF's face up on top, but he falls out of camera view. That was the entire basis of my criticism. And I think the criticism that a lot of other people had as well. It wasn't that, goddamn, when I watched this match, I was expecting Jericho to go splat right on the floor. And boy, am I disappointed that didn't happen. Who is saying this? Where are these people? It's like the people who many people say that many people. Who are these people? I want you to be specific. Who are these people? They don't exist. They don't exist. They're a figment of their imagination. And these people are idiots who wasted their energy and wasted their breath trying to make this argument like it was going to make them look cool. Oh my God, I can't believe all these podcasters and all these people who are upset. And these are the people with checks next to their name as if they're supposed to be some kind of great authority. And I'm like, these are the people who are putting this out. It's one thing, again, if you're an unknown egg on Twitter, but that wasn't the case. I was appalled. I mean, I always expect to see stupid shit on social media, but from some of these people, absolutely ridiculous. Nobody argued that. Nobody at any point said that. These people know better. Don't listen to these people. Use common sense. It's a very fair criticism. I have found that there are a lot of AEW fans who melt down at the slightest criticism of the product, as if AEW can do no wrong. We went through this years ago with the TNA cult. Remember them? The TNA Army, or whatever the hell they called themselves. I dedicated many segments on this show to those people. A lot of them belonged in a padded room with their shoelaces taken away from them. I don't want to have to start going off on the AEW diehards every week for the same thing. This is not a team sport. You're not pinch hitting for them off the bench. It's okay to critique things when there are things to critique, and nobody is asking for anyone to be splattered on concrete. Now, they had a segment on this show Wednesday with Darby Allin. He took this wicked bump down a flight of concrete stairs. He may have been wearing padding, but even still, this looked completely brutal. He's going to be defending his TNT title this Wednesday against Miro. And they're really setting it up with the injury being an excuse should he drop the belt, which I expect him to do. I think we're going to have a new champion this week. We've got SCU challenging the Young Bucks for the AEW Tag Team titles. And remember, if SCU loses, they're done. They're finished as a team. Jon Moxley defends the IWGP United States Championship against Yuji Nagata. And we've got a world title eliminator match, Pac, one-on-one against Orange Cassidy. And the winner will go on to challenge Kenny Omega for the championship at Double or Nothing on May 30th. I'm hoping for Pac. I'm pulling for Pac. I just think that's going to be a much better match. But look, OC, he's over. The AEW fans, they love him. I think if he wins on Wednesday, they're going to be happy. They're going to be happy to see a fresh match. We have not seen Kenny Omega one-on-one against Orange Cassidy, so that is a match we've not seen before. But me personally, I'm pulling for Pac. I think that would be a hell of a main event if they went back. And again, Pac has a history. He's beaten Omega before. So there is a story there you could tell where going in, it's like, here's a guy who's beaten Kenny Omega. He can do it again. They are planning, by the way, full capacity seating at Daly's Place on the 30th for Double or Nothing. So that's going to be around 5,000 people.